Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's fireside chat. In today's topic, we'll be discussing on how we are able to manage teams or work remotely. And I think with what's going on in the past year, with the current climate, I'm sure everyone's aware, due to the pandemic, many businesses have had to adapt quickly to remote working. And so far, the business community has had no choice but in a way to kind of embrace this rising norm of working from home or working remotely. And while remote management may not be something new, I think its execution may still need proper planning and deliberation. And it's also important for us to figure out the long-term strategy and plans for a collaborative and efficient way of remote working. So there are a few relevant issues to address in remote management so that plans can be executed smoothly. Otherwise, it could lead us to issues from the output of our teamwork down to our levels of productivity. So it is useful for managers to understand how they can also manage effectively offsite. So in today's fireside chat, we will focus on how we are able to better facilitate remote management from company culture to operational plans. So if you guys have any questions regarding this topic, and somewhere along the lines, if something just pops up to your mind, feel free to drop it in the Q&A section or the general chat. So that's why today I think it is also our pleasure to have a chat with someone experienced in the sector of remote working, like Richard Kwan. And Richard is the founder of Kiratech, a software solutions company based in Adelaide, Australia. And they have embraced remote management for quite some time now and manages most of its overseas teams remotely. So good day, Richard. Welcome, and thank you for having the time to share and have this discussion with us.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
How's everything going there in Australia?
We're loving it here, to be perfectly honest. Adelaide is one of the few cities in the world where we actually haven't had significant lockdowns and things like that due to the COVID situation. But it's also exacerbated the need for remote working and made it more prominent. So we're kind of benefiting from it at the same time as well.
Nice. It's a different world over there compared to over here.
Yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for what's going on in the world, but we'll get through it.
Yes, we will. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about Kiratech's nature of business? I understand you guys are a software solution company, but do you mind explaining a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so after building up a career within IT, so across about 15 or so years, I started up when I was very young and then built and sold 2 IT companies. I founded Kiratech after developing developing those skills for myself to help others. And that's why I then founded the organization with the goal to tackle the world's most challenging problems and help entrepreneurs do that. And the way we do that is we identify the entrepreneurs as the kind of the champion. You could be a startup founder, or you could work within an enterprise organization or government or an industry association. And our persona to identify the entrepreneur is somebody that has the outside of the box thinking, the determination to be given the autonomy to solve problems within that organization. And so we empower them through technical understanding through the software development. So they'll ask us, hey, we've got a problem within a certain industry. We'd like you to develop a software product for us that can help us drive the efficiency or automation. That's typically the main purposes of technology. And then so I started up the company, and then now we focus on 4 different industries at the moment: automotive, medical, waste management, and agriculture. Wow. So we've been able to diversify after focusing on automotive to begin with. And since the last 12 months, we've branched out to 3 other industries through our ability to grow and leveraging remote working teams. With our, a few of our lead developers are in Malaysia. Jonathan's one of them here. Shout out to Jonathan. So that's basically where we're at the moment. And what we do is we will work with those industry leaders and those entrepreneurs in those industries to identify where there are problems along the supply chain. So in the automotive industry, it was, how do we recycle cars? So then we started doing our research on how do we develop software solutions that can recycle cars, which is a really big problem around the world. And then for waste management, it was, how do we manage waste through our state and track where that waste goes so we can better recycle it. So there are a few examples of the kind of problems that we started solving.
Nice. So it sounds like quite a range of industries that you're in, because you're in IT and being able to provide all these solutions that I guess each industry has different issues that they kind of face. And with you being at IT and with you covering such a range of industries, just want to know, how has the pandemic, has it affected your way of working, with you being able to cover all these different industries?
So we were working remotely way before the pandemic, a good 3-4 years prior to it, and we were building relationships in Sarawak. So I'm from Malaysia originally, in Kwan, on the west side, and Jonathan was one of our developers that I met through when I started a hosting company before Kiratech, and he was asking for advice on how he could then gear up his education, and then what topics should he study. And then when he was approached in college, he was allowed to do an internship. So I said, why not do an internship with us? We can sponsor you, we'll provide you an allowance, and then hire you if you're successful at the end of that internship. And that's what we were able to do. So he was one of our first remote employees that we brought on board, and he's based in Kuching. And so that has been going on for about 3-4 years now, with specifically under Kiratech, and I've known Jonathan for way before that, a good 10 years or something like that. It's hard for me to recall. So we were working remotely, and we were building those systems in place so we could both support an emerging economy using technology, and then also with the remote working environment. And then we had to learn to be adaptive and flexible to people's working arrangements. So one of the things that we did was working with Malcolm in iCube and provide a co-working space and a safe environment for people to work from, with the right infrastructure, such as internet connectivity, and then went from there.
Nice. Yeah, I did hear from Malcolm that he had a chance to host you down here in Sarawak, and I think from what I understand, Jonathan was doing a full-time internship with you guys. So I think that was kind of something that was quite interesting, and it's something that could actually be beneficial to Sarawak over here. One thing that we're kind of facing over here is that with a lot of our younger talents, they always want to move out to the larger cities for better job opportunities, and also I guess with reason, and we can perfectly understand why they would want to do that. But I think with now being able to work remotely and being able to hire people full-time remotely as well, I think they can also have that kind of foreign job opportunities at hand as well, but just a different experience within the same city, So I guess with your experience and having to hire people remotely, is there any way that you use to, like, any skill sets that you look to in terms of hiring people, or anything that you kind of look out for when you're looking for people to hire remotely?
Yeah, so the two main qualities I look for is aptitude and attitude. So do they have the capability to pick up a technical skill that you can then commercialize, and then do they have the attitude to turn up? Do they have the right mindset to keep learning? So having Jonathan from when we first met him, or when I first met him, he had the attitude to ask for a role within the organization that I founded at that time, and then he rose to the occasion by saying, what should I be studying to further improve on my role, and then what should I study when I go to school and then college, and how does that line up with his future? So that was really beneficial. So what happened there was we built that relationship off of a personal relationship, and then got to know him and build that rapport. but you can't take 5 to 10 years to hire each employee. So from there, as we hired more people, we started focusing on the culture, making sure we had the right culture that lines up with people on a personal and professional level as much as the company vision. So those three things have to line up. And then you can talk about salary expectations and the kind of technical role within the organization. And then as the founder, I can't keep doing everything. I can't do all the hiring, then do all the sales, product development, and so on and so forth. As a founder, your role increases all the time, your responsibilities and the amount of upskilling you have to do yourself. So what ended up happening was then Jonathan would recruit other people to join the organization and say, hey, my friend has been studying with me, and I've been telling him to study the same kind of tech skills that we need in the organization. How about we interview him and see if he wants to come on board, and so on and so forth. So the power of culture is once you set that precedent in that direction, then other people will actually do the recruiting for you. So that's actually what's happened as well. So Jonathan's been able to recruit locally within Malaysia as well, which has helped.
Nice. That's very good to know. So then with I guess it's more you with you being able to have one person that you can trust, and then you being able to have that trust to, I guess, look into certain ways, certain skill sets for him to look to hire people. I think that would it be safe to say that in a way that trust in terms of understanding your company culture and being able to see how you guys work would be one of the ways for you guys to branch out in terms of hiring people. And I guess it's also a way for us to look at how we can grow organically, like you mentioned.
Yes, so that's worked out really well for us at the moment. And then the other benefit is that they're kind of hiring friends, or they're bringing people that they've already built a relationship with as well. And so yes, as you're saying, that trust and giving them that autonomy and responsibility, because as the organization grows and we bring on more projects or our products grow, we need more help. And having a culture set that they start recruiting people that they already know means that it's less time for us to less time, and time is money, basically, is what it comes down to, especially at the startup phase. And one of the most common reasons for a startup to fail is due to the company culture and the people that you're recruiting as part of that organization. And so that's why I focus, my first and foremost is making sure that the team stays together and keeps growing.
Right, nice. I mean, with you having to overlook and to lead so many projects, and is there any certain tools or any ways that you use to in order to facilitate your management process with all these different teams?
Yeah, specifically tools. Microsoft Teams we use for emails and internal real-time communication, and SharePoint. Then we use Atlassian for Jira for task management, for development task management, Bitbucket and GitHub for source code management, and Tempo for time tracking. So we pull it all together, and and then we use the tool called Tempo to generate all the fancy reports that tells me how each individual staff is performing, how each team is performing, and then how the company overall is performing, both from a effort perspective, making sure that if you're a full-time person, you're doing your full-time hours, and what that equates to in terms of productivity. And then on the other side, making sure that projects are on time, on budget, and we're financially successful.
Nice. So I guess with being able to manage all these people from different parts of the world, how do you manage your teams in terms of their working hours? And if there's any, like for example, are there ways for managers to better facilitate their group in terms of professional etiquette and global teams?
So we try and have as much overlap in time zones as possible to help bridge that gap and make a convenient time for real-time communication. And then we make sure that all staff can be customer facing. So we want the ability for our staff to be able to communicate, not just internally with each other, but also directly with customers. because we want to remove the degrees of separation when you're dealing with customers. And then we also make sure that they agree to a certain time frame that they're going to work in. So, and that can be, do you want to work 1 day a week or 5 days a week? And then the KPIs and parameters around that. And then we give them the autonomy. So if you're on a 40-week contract and you're full-time, then as long as you're working within our structure, you're dealing with customers' expectations. So that could be, for some of our clients, they only require 1 meeting a week, and sometimes it's 3 to 5. So as long as they're showing up for those specific times, then we allow them to work whenever they want. So if you wanted to work 8 till 6, you can work 8 till 6. You want to work 9 to 5, you can do that. If you want to work 4 p.m. to 12 p.m. at night, then that's fine as well, as long as you're meeting the basic structure.
Right. So I guess the trust is a important factor, and I think that also with all these new different tools and the different working hours, I think there's also ways where you can have, I guess, I don't know, if sometimes could it be a little bit more complicated, or are there any challenges involved sometimes when you're trying to manage, and how are the ways that you kind of dealt with it?
Yeah, so I mean, in today's world, it's no longer a 9 to 5 day. Everybody wants their flexibility. Everybody wants the ability to control their time. And so what we wanted to make sure is that we could provide that. And it's really important to teach people these skills to manage their own time. And so this forces them into that discipline. And then when you tie it in with their compensation and performance, you give them a sense of responsibility and autonomy, because if you can start managing your own time really, really effectively, and not just be a person that turns up to the office at 9 and leaves at 5, but actually thinks about how can you be productive within the time frame that you're given for yourself and hold yourself accountable, then it really helps you in that team environment. So that's one of the other benefits that we had from this.
Right. So for yourself, is there any particular way that, for example, once a week you have, in order to keep on top of things, to keep track of things, that you have a schedule for you to keep track on to what everyone is kind of doing? Yes.
So typically we have at the start of the week, each team has a sprint planning. So we work in sprints. Our sprints are typically 1 to 2 weeks, and then at the start of the week, they'll plan what they are going to attempt to execute for that week. And then at the end of the week, that specific team will then do a retrospective and assess how did they go, what went right, what went wrong, and what can they do better. And so they have that consistent feedback loop. And then if they're dealing with a customer, they'll include the customer as part of that retrospective and offer them a report. And then from an executive point of view, we see those reports that are generated from each team, and also the reports, so a performance report as a team and an individual performance report on the hours that they've, and the workload associated with that. And then through that, we then can assess the kind of quality of work that they're doing, and through experience and leveraging the amount of data that we have now and keep collecting, we can keep now making executive decisions just by looking at the data now.
Right. So I guess it's kind of made like the decision process a lot easier as well, while being able to keep track on your team. It
has, but it started off one-on-one, each staff member, nurturing them from a technical perspective, attitude, working on them one-on-one in the earlier days. And then you had to put in the systems in place. And once you got the systems, then you need the data. So then you got to wait on that. And then you still need to back it up with communication for context purposes. But instead of spending 2 to 4 hours with each staff member per week, now you can bring that down to 15 minutes, for example, just to go, hey, this data says this, are we on track? Rather than having the whole conversation. So that's just our kind of like maturation path.
Right. Nice. And I guess so what are your thoughts on streamlining and digitizing and also automating your operations from that point of view?
So I look at it from, in earlier days, I used to think, why can't people work a lot harder? And then you start looking at the data and you kind of look at it and go, why can't we make more money? Why can't we push these guys? But you after you give them control and autonomy, that's really what builds the loyalty and the culture. And then you're looking at the performance just to make sure that they're on track. But you can't push people too hard, and you can't keep trying to automate as much as possible as well. And you also need to take it in steps. So every year we'll evaluate, okay, this year do we look at becoming more efficient, or this year do we look at growing? And so because you can't keep changing the tools that you're using all the time as well. And there are always better tools around the corner. And so the way that we look at it, we make that decision. We look at it every quarter and every year. When do we need to change over tools, or when do we need to drive more efficiency? And if they're naturally becoming more efficient because they're getting better and better at using the tools, then we can focus on growth. We try not to do both at the same time, because then you kind of trying to tackle too many beasts at once, so to speak.
Right. All this pretty interesting to know. I think we have a question from Kiman over here. His question is, what's your view on the use of remote surveillance software used in some companies to monitor their working from home staff? For example, like the automated screenshot to monitor what the staff is doing.
I personally trust my staff and haven't had to implement those kind of measures. I understand why they exist, especially for highly repetitive tasks. And depending on the way that you look at it, it can be an invasion of privacy. But at the same time, if you're providing a work device and it should only be used for work purposes, then that's a different story altogether. Fortunately, I just haven't found the necessary need for us to justify that kind of surveillance, and also the expense that comes with it. And then there's also the infrastructure that's required for it. Then you need to upgrade your hardware to make sure that it can support that kind of software and things like that as well. So we simply just haven't had a need for it.
Right. Okay. Cool. And something I've always kind of wondered is that when you have like companies who are hiring people remotely, and I think from what I understand, larger companies are also looking to do that as well. So just out of curiosity, how do companies, you think, would manage, let's say, compensation for global teams? For example, if you were to hire someone full-time remotely, how do you extend the kind of benefits that are available versus someone that you hire in person?
So when we go through the interview process and we've identified somebody that's going to be the right culture, meets our minimum requirements for the specific job role in terms of maybe years of experience or the specific skill set, then we'll do our research on what's the market rates within that local where they're working from, do some research on medical expenses, transportation expenses, and we'll build like an allowance to make sure that we're making sure that they can be financially supportive of themselves. Because if you don't do those things, then they're obviously going to take shortcuts or work two jobs and things like that. And if they start doing that, then they're not going to be very efficient or focused for your organization. So once we've got a marketplace salary, depending on what the role is, then I'll actually ask them how much they want to be paid, and then work on over time a financial compensation structure that, based off performance, they can keep growing, and then based off their upskilling and potential growing role, then we'll compensate them further based off that as well. So the easiest way to resolve pay disputes is to not have them at all. And if someone tells you how much they want to be paid and you pay them exactly what they want, then everyone's happy. And obviously we still pay them within what we can afford as well. It's not like we just pay them anything. And there's a trust, and everyone is the right people will be reasonable in their compensation. And we're not looking at people that are chasing the financial reward. We're looking at people that make the right fit for the organization. And then if we're doing the right thing as an organization, if I'm doing my role as the CEO, then we are making enough money to pay people fairly anyway. So that's where I kind of marry the two goals there.
Nice. just out of curiosity, like let's say with what you have kind of experienced with Jonathan and how he was able to build up a whole team for you, would this be the kind of strategy you would look into to further hire people if you were going to set up somewhere in let's say in Kuching? You would have someone where they are familiar with the market, and then that way he would be someone that you can trust in order to run your research and then kind of see what kind of values, not values, sorry, but what kind of I guess what kind of market is there available for something that you want to start. And in terms of the structure and the hiring process, do you think that this is one way where it, apart from growing organically, it is somewhere where companies can use this strategy to kind of understand the area better? And also, I guess one way of looking at it is also a way to cut costs in terms of the hiring process and the whole setup structure, where you just have someone to work remotely for you and kind of do the research and then to see whether it's feasible for you to kind of start a business over here.
So it depends on how fast you want to push things and how fast you want to grow and what your risk appetite is. So for us and for where we are right now, I'm very happy taking our time, so to speak, and making sure that we don't fall over through our growth phase, and by making sure that first and foremost we find the right people. Then in the near future, for example, if we were to raise some capital and we now need to accelerate that growth and therefore accelerate the hiring of talent, we might not have the luxury of simply just leveraging our internal people knowing other people. We would have to then hire an HR person and say, hey, can you reach out and hire 10 people, knowing that we'll only keep 3 to 5 of them, if that makes sense. And just know that from a numbers perspective, we'll have to pay 10 people for 6 months and just see how they go and keep the ones that we can keep. So we would have to change our strategy of how we're gonna have to hire. But that just costs more money, but you'll grow faster at the same time. So it just depends on how fast we want to grow and where we're going. And while we do expect that kind of growth sooner rather than later, I'm also making sure that we don't try and grow too fast at the same time. So because I want to maintain the culture first and foremost of our organization, and that can be lost if you're chasing the dollars or trying to grow the company too big.
So let's say with all the you having to overlook so many things, and with I guess being in IT, that I think it also is easier in your nature of business to be able to work remotely. Has there been any challenges that you face that or any complications in terms of managing these teams remotely, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Definitely building the culture. So I'm always a fan of social interaction and meeting face to face. And so what we attempted to do at the start was have a co-working space where we started hiring all of our staff to give them a physical place to go to, just to show some discipline, turn up on time, and also for the social interaction. So for example, that's why we were in IQ. And however, then the pandemic changed that, and then instead of working in a co-working space, then it was safer for them to start working from home. And so that's kind of one of the challenges that we had to face. But maintaining that culture across 4 or 5 different countries that we're currently operating across now with all our talent can be difficult, and you got to be patient while you work that. Some people decide to work night shifts to make it work within the time zones, and so you got to appreciate the fact that they're doing that. Some of them are doing it for their own personal reasons, not just for Kiratech as well. So I think just having to maintain that team and across the 4 different locations and doing that digitally is very difficult. But since we brought on a marketing person, she's kind of been responsible for maintaining the culture, remembering everyone's birthdays. So we'll try and do something for everyone's birthday, even if it's digitally, we'll still try and do that. And then still locally in each area, have kind of like gatherings once every quarter. We typically try and at least get everyone together when it's safe to do so, because I believe that at the end of the day, even though you can work remotely, nothing replaces that interaction physically. And hopefully once COVID's over, because prior to COVID, I was traveling and meeting up all the staff in all the locations to maintain that physical relationship. But unfortunately, we just have to wait and see until we can start doing those things again, and then inviting them to come to Australia and vice versa, in our staff to go overseas from Australia.
Nice. Yeah, I heard from Malcolm that you had a brief time over here in Sarawak, and yeah. So I think with flexibility and trust is something that is also part of this whole working remote culture. And I think with you mentioned after all this is over, let's say for example with more people getting vaccinated and restrictions looking to ease in some parts, what do you think are the post-pandemic plans or the transition strategies? Do you think working remotely will continue, or do you think that people will still want to have that kind of it's easier to control your team in a in-person environment, or you think that companies will be moving forward to allow certain days where you're allowed to work from home and have that kind of flexibility?
So what I've seen is that the pandemic has exacerbated the push for remote technologies, remote surveillance, and therefore promoting that capability does exist, and it's a new norm. So it's like a paradigm shift. And so I believe that in the future, there'll be a hybrid environment where staff will have more of the option to work from home and from the office. And there still will be mandated offices for the specific locations where it works, but also with the flexibility of adding remote to complement that and to give employees or people the more control over their time and flexibility more than anything. And I think it's just going to be a hybrid model of both.
Right. Cool. We have a question from Johan. What are your thoughts on virtual office spaces?
Virtual office spaces, as in, can you be a bit more specific than that?
I guess you have online classrooms now and certain things like that. I think it's probably one where you meet up in a software where it's based on the company, and then you would have this kind of virtual office experience where you conduct meetings.
Yep. So we will do that virtual meeting at least once a month, where all staff will get together, or if there's a significant event where we want to announce it to everybody that we feel like we should bring everybody in the organization together, we'll do that digitally in a virtual office environment. And we've found, as long as you have the right expectations and people are working within overlapping time zones, and then you can be inclusive of everybody. And then you can also record the meetings now, so the people that are working in different time zones, they can always watch it later as well. So that's and we found that very beneficial for us for the communication from the top down, basically.
Right. So then for Kiratech, did you guys have your own software where you guys can kind of log in and kind of meet virtually from that aspect?
Yeah, so we're using Microsoft Teams for that.
Right, cool. We have another question from Lydia. Hi, Richard. What would the biggest challenge for you with ensuring remote teams are working efficiently? Nice question.
So we tie up the compensation to their performance, and as I see the reports, usually within 2 to 4 weeks of a performance issue, we will identify that problem. And if there's a problem, then the certain team leader will speak to that staff member and address it. Because they're working in a team environment every day, they will hold each other accountable and say, hey Nigel, you were supposed to send off that email to that client yesterday, but it didn't get done. Do you need any help? And internally, they will then resolve it. If not, then the team leader will raise that issue with the executive team, and the executive team will have a look at it. And then if it gets beyond that, then I'll intervene and figure out what the certain situation is. So we give them processes, but also accountability and KPIs that directly correlate to their compensation as well. So if they are not performing, it does affect how they're getting paid too. And so we've got measures to catch it, but you still have to always give people the opportunity to then identify it.
Nice. Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's more, I think moving forward, it seems like working remotely is going to be something where it's kind of unavoidable. And from what I understood now with certain countries getting used to working from home remotely, certain companies have also kind of started implementing that they can have like 3 days a week to work from home. And I think the people will be in the office versus 30% from home. And I think it's something where it's like what you mentioned is like a paradigm shift with what's happening now around the world. Do you think that with this kind of flexibility being provided now, that working hours will kind of be expected to be longer, or your work would be kind of expected to be stretched out in a sense where if you're working from home and you would kind of be expected to be, I guess, on call in a way?
I think there's more of a shift towards not just being paid on an hourly basis, but on a performance basis. And so with that flexibility comes, if you want to work whenever you want, wherever you want, and you need that trust, then you need some kind of way to measure that. And the way to measure that is through satisfied customers and revenue that's coming through. And less about, hey, you're only turning up 39 out of the 40 hours that you're recording. Where's that 1 hour going? Do you know what I mean? You stop looking this too deep, because you can get caught in the numbers, and that's one of the traps that we want to avoid, and look at the context of the overall situation. And some people are better at recording the hours and some people aren't. And then if you say, all right, well, let's blanket this and install surveillance software on everyone's laptops so they can work from home, then you're kind of like, oh, we're allowing you the flexibility, we're trusting you to work from home, but we're going to record every second that you do. So do we really trust you? And so you got to find that right balance, and that really affects the culture of an organization as well. So for us, we just want to keep maintaining that balance.
Yeah, true. There's a few questions here. One from Rachel. The current pandemic and its circumstances are likely to affect employees mentally. How does your company manage employee mental health as they do remote work?
So that's why we try and have at least the monthly meeting where all the staff get together. And that's why also I generate a report every week as a letter to the staff, and where we acknowledge all staff have the opportunity through the retrospectives to acknowledge a team member that has been performing really well, specifically. So it could have been, just another example is, Nigel sent that email to the client and then they responded saying they were really, really happy with the work that we produced, and here's their testimonial. And so I'll give that back into a letter just to keep the kind of culture going that, hey guys, even though we're in a pandemic, the work that we're doing is actually benefiting these people, and here are the results, and here's the impact that we're making. So that, and it fits in with the direction. And then trying to leverage the fact that if we're not paying for offices and things like that, to pay people more as well, to try and keep them a bit happy there. So not taking the money that we're saving from not paying for office space, but saying, hey, okay, now you're not traveling, we can actually pay you a little bit more to kind of help you out there. And then also just acknowledging a simple thing, people's birthdays or performance when they do a really good job.
Yeah, I think just simple things to keep the morale up, like remembering people's birthdays. I think those will be very, very helpful in terms of making them feel a little bit more appreciated.
Yeah, but also giving them the time off when they need it as well. I think that's also just as important. Not acknowledging when they're there, but giving them the opportunity to step away. And that can be very hard when you're in your house 24/7, you're forced to be there. Sometimes it's even hard for staff to turn off, but actually forcing them to do so also can benefit them as well.
Right. So we have 2 more questions here. Someone asked, what kind of skill sets that we as uni students should have? We are not a tech student, but from a business, marketing, accounts, or finance program.
Business, marketing, and finance specifically, understanding how to actually grow a company, what the trajectory is, and depending on what kind of company you want to work with, if you want to work in an enterprise, government, or a startup, they're all different financial models that you need to kind of understand. Like a typical startup will want that 3-year growth, go from $1 million a year to $100 million a year in 3 to 5 years kind of thing. That's high risk kind of thing. But understanding most importantly, being able to deal with people. So no matter what you're doing, the first thing to start is to be able to do your research and build that network and that capability. So if you want to be a sales person, then you need to attract the right people around you that know how to conduct sales and learn from them. And that requires you being able to build relationships and then doing research on how do I become a good salesperson. And it's the same thing if you want to be a marketing person or you want to become an operations or a business manager. And so I've had to do that as I've evolved the company over the years. And each time I need to find out something new, I make sure that I surround myself with someone that has done it before and has the capability to teach someone else how to do it as well. So just because someone's good at it doesn't mean they're good at teaching it at the same time. So that's how I've learned how to do the sales, the marketing, the business, the product delivery, product creation, engineering, etc., and put it together in a company, then hire the right people for the right roles. Because I've just had to go through that pathway and do it over time.
Right. So I think with your experience in all these in IT, I think you can also cover all these different industries as well. Do you think that there would be any industry in particular that would have, let's say, do you think they would have any issue moving forward for all these people working from home, because most of their documents would be private and confidential and be based in the office, in terms of accessibility to be able to work from home, these kind of softwares? Do you think that there would be some sort of flexibility to give access to that, or there would have to be something where it's a bit more secure?
I think you have to now. If you want to keep growing, and you have to trust your people that if they're accessing the data, they're going to do it in a confidential way, and they're not stealing your data. I mean, there are tools to make sure that if people are copying files, that some kind of manager gets alerted as well, as part of the surveillance packages out there. So it's not just screenshots; it's also what files in the organization are you accessing. So there are systems out there to monitor people, but at the same time, if you want people to contribute to the organization and they need to do it remotely, then you need to do it digitally. Then you need to give them the access. So that becomes an organization decision, and obviously then they need to take in consideration what those risks are for that. But with the tools out there, SharePoint, Google Docs, the Dropbox, there really isn't a reason not to enable people access to documents and things like that these days.
Right. We have another question here from Johan. There's been talk of moving to 4-day work weeks with fewer hours per day, something like 6-hour days only. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so if you take an average employee, 38, 40 hours a week, they'll only do maybe 20 hours of work. You lose 5 hours a week just from them having lunch, and then between 10 to 15 hours in meetings typically, and then the rest of the time, 15 to 20 hours, is just doing their specific role. So if you can be, and that 20 hours in that specific role is typically what they're paid for. And so if I look at the numbers and look at the report, I'm thinking these guys are only working at 60% capacity. So if you can be more efficient with that 60% and do less of the work that doesn't produce value, potentially, I'm not saying all of it doesn't, but if you look at it from that perspective, then you can condense that into a 4-day working week and work less. And that's typically what freelancers do. So a freelancer will build up a proficiency and then a specific skill set and a niche, and then they'll typically charge more as an hourly rate, and then be in control of their time and work less. So most freelancers will say they'll do 20 to 30 hours, but charge more per hour, but they're not working under an organization, they're working for themselves. So that's kind of like a way that people do a 4-day work week right now. But all it comes down to is what's the value that you can deliver as an employee or as a freelance contractor, and that's how you figure out how you can work a 4-day work week or even less.
Right. Yeah, I think that's pretty true. Just out of curiosity, I think moving forward with how the people will be working more remotely and your experience in IT, do you think it's possible for almost every industry to kind of start working remotely, or there's certain industries like F&B for sure, those are different, but I think all the other corporate kind of industries, do you think most of the industries are able to kind of work remotely here on out?
I definitely think so, but at the same time, I don't think that we should also replace all social interaction with technology, because then you might as well just be in the matrix and plug ourselves into the matrix and not interact with each other and things like that. But I think what technology is supposed to do is to enable humans to do more with less effectively, and bridge the gaps and make meetings like this or fireside chats like this practical, where they weren't 10 years ago, through lack of internet accessibility, through the platform and the communities existing and whatnot. So I think most industries can benefit from it, and they should embrace it, and they already are. So if you look at what the growing trends are of technology adoption and whatnot, and the introduction through Starlink, having internet accessibility anywhere in the world coming in the next 5 to 10 years, the opportunities really are endless from that regard, and we should really be embracing it.
Nice. Well, we have another question as well. Someone is asking, hiring talents that is outside of Australia, how would you evaluate their salary and also benefits and employees contract?
Yeah, so I think I explained that a little bit earlier. I'll look at their local market rates to see what employees are paid for in that region. I compare it to what they could potentially be contracted if there was another organisation like us approaching them as well. So I want to make sure that we retain our staff, not just from a direction and a culture perspective, but also from a compensation perspective. We'll research the local taxation laws there as well, to understand what kind of requirements there are there, and what the employee structure then looks like in that certain country. And then we'll also look at the education and the kind of like the inflation rates and what's an average salary that they need to live on, and then we'll come up with a salary from there. And so we'll have a base figure, and then we'll also ask the employee how much they would like to be paid, because depending on their circumstance, they need a certain salary for their own personal life. And so then we kind of have those two numbers, and then we kind of figure out the best of both worlds, the compromise in between.
Cool, nice. I think we're more or less reaching towards the end of our fireside chat today. So there's one section that we usually do right before we end our chat, and it's a rapid fire question. So these are questions where you shouldn't take too long to think, and so whatever comes to your head, just kind of just answer. It's kind of like an icebreaker. So yeah, so just at the top of your head, if you were stuck on an island, what would be 3 things that you'd bring?
My partner. I don't think I could live without her these days. A boat, so I could get off that island, and food.
Good. Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Cool. Apple or Windows?
Windows.
Okay. Favorite guilty pleasure?
Chocolate.
Nice. So I understand you mentioned just now that you were also, your parents are from Malaysia.
Yes.
So, laksa or Mrs. Max pies?
Laksa.
Nice. Okay. So we've kind of reached the end of our chat today. Thank you so much, Richard. It's been very, very insightful in terms of all the things that you've shared. And I hope that you've also kind of enjoyed what you've discussed today as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I always look forward to working with Malcolm as well. when he invites me, and I love what he's been doing over there in Kuching, and been great meeting you, Nigel, as well. And I'm just very happy to be part of it.